I'm going to tell you how I lost everything, and then got it all back by fighting a war against a fake neighborhood watch group run by a corporation trying to steal $400 million worth of oil from under my boots. Yeah, you heard that right. This isn't fiction. This is about a man who just wanted peace, finding himself standing on the biggest oil field in 2 counties and realizing the grief he thought would kill him was actually the only thing that could save him. My name is Jake Sterling, and 6 months ago, I was a ghost. My wife, Alara, she passed from a cancer that moved way too fast, and the house we shared in Dallas, it turned into a mausoleum. Every empty room whispered her name. So, I did what any broken man does. I ran. I sold the house, liquidated my savings, and bought the most forgotten, God-forsaken patch of scrubland I could find. It was 340 acres of abandoned Texas range in a place called Serpent Creek, and I got it for a steal, about $180,000. The real estate guy practically stammered through the closing, insisting it was cheap because of the remote location, but I didn't care. Isolation was the only thing I needed, the kind of silence that either buries you or brings you back to life. I spent the first few weeks just working. Manual labor is a decent substitute for therapy, you know? Clearing brush, patching the roof on the sun-bleached barn, realizing my 15 years as a retired geological consultant had left me methodical and strong, if nothing else. It was on day 19, while hauling out buckets of old junk from the ranch house basement, that my boot caught on a loose floorboard. Underneath, wrapped in stained canvas, was an old metal lockbox. Inside, a geological survey map dated 1993. It was covered in annotations, seismic data, stratigraphic columns, all the technical language I specialized in. And in the far corner, circled 3 times in thick red marker, was the phrase that made my heart punch the air out of my lungs. The sovereign fault. Do not disturb. I didn't sleep for 2 days. I cross-referenced the coordinates using old university software I'd kept, pulling up public satellite imagery and comparing it to the old map. The heat signature anomalies, the telltale signs of hydrocarbons close enough to the surface to affect ground temp. They were all there, exactly where the map predicted. I ran the calculations 3 times, my hands trembling with the same meticulous precision I used to map ancient riverbeds. Conservative estimate? 3.5 million barrels of high-quality crude, plus natural gas. At current market prices, we were talking north of $380 million. My tomb for grief was sitting on a fortune that could reshape not just my life, but a dozen others. I realized this wasn't about wealth, it was about purpose. I could start an ecological foundation in Alara's name, fund research. I could build something meaningful from the wreckage. I felt hope for the first time since she was gone, and that feeling, man, it was terrifying. But when you discover something big, you're never the first to know. On the 3rd day after the discovery, a black, high-end Audi SUV appeared at the end of my long, dusty driveway. 2 guys in suits, clearly not locals. One had a camera with a monster telephoto lens aimed right at the house. I stepped onto the porch, making myself visible, and the engine immediately started, kicking up dust as they peeled away. No license plate. Just that cold, uncomfortable certainty that someone was watching. That same night, I found a glossy catalog in my mailbox. Mineral Rights Defense and Consultation Services. I hadn't told a soul. I hadn't even Googled drilling. Yet, within 72 hours of finding that map, targeted commercial materials for my exact situation had arrived. That timing wasn't coincidence. It was calculated. Then the letter came. It was certified, requiring 3 signatures, and the return address was Creekwood Estates Homeowners Association. I'd never heard of it. I read the subject line, and the bureaucratic prose cut like a knife. Notice of HOA formation and mandatory compliance. The letter claimed my property was now under HOA jurisdiction, effective immediately. Annual fees of $18,000, due in 30 days. And then came the list of mandatory restrictions. No excavation deeper than 3 feet without board approval. No geological surveys. No mineral rights leasing without HOA consent. My archaeology training kicked in, parsing the deliberate language. Every single rule was designed, surgically, to paralyze any attempt I might make to access the oil. Someone had crafted these regulations specifically to steal my land, without ever setting foot on it. The letter was signed by 2 people, Vivian Thorne, HOA president, and a lawyer named Arthur Vance. I ran the public records. The HOA was officially registered 2 weeks ago, 5 days after I closed on the ranch. Its 12-member properties? 8 belonged to Shell LLCs registered in the Cayman Islands. 4 were individuals whose names produced 0 results in any public database. Ghost members, paper entities, the whole thing was manufactured, timed perfectly. This wasn't local bureaucracy, this was high-level strategy. And then they showed up. A gleaming black BMW X7 pulled right up to the porch, parking close enough to feel invasive. Out stepped Vivian Thorne. She was immaculate, silver hair cut in a severe bob, wearing Chanel, and she moved with the ruthless, practiced authority of someone who commands rooms for a living. Arthur Vance, the lawyer, trailed slightly behind her. "Mr. Sterling," she said, extending a perfectly manicured hand, her smile sharp as broken glass. "I'm Vivian Thorne. We wanted to welcome you personally to the community." I wiped sawdust from my hands and shook it, playing the gracious host while my mind raced. "I appreciate the visit," I said, channeling 15 years of academic diplomacy. "Though I'm curious about the timing. Your HOA seems to have formed right after I bought this place." Vivian's smile didn't waver. It was frozen in place. "Pure coincidence, Mr. Sterling. The county's been planning this zoning adjustment for months. But it is fortunate. This area has special environmental considerations. The Red Bluff aquifer beneath us supplies water to 3 communities. We have to be extremely careful about any activity that might compromise it." She paused at the porch steps, looking back at me with that practiced, predatory glint. "The point, Mr. Sterling, is that surface ownership and mineral rights are distinct concepts under Texas law. Our covenant ensures you can't unilaterally exploit what lies beneath without community consensus." She'd known exactly what to say. They knew about the oil. I immediately called the sharpest real estate lawyer I knew, a woman named Marlo Vega. She showed up that afternoon, and, after reviewing the documents, her frustration was palpable. "This is aggressive, Jake. They're not trying to negotiate. They want to lock down your property completely." The actual lawsuit arrived Monday morning. 40 pages claiming I had violated a fraudulent property covenant dating back to 1995. They alleged unauthorized excavation, disturbing protected habitat, seeking an immediate temporary freezing of the property title. Marlo estimated $60,000 just to fight through the preliminary stages. My savings, everything I had left after the ranch purchase, totaled $90,000. Fighting this meant financial suicide, regardless of the outcome. The escalation came that night. I woke up at 2 a.m. to the low, grinding sound of machinery. A drill, somewhere in the northwest section. I grabbed a flashlight and ran. 3 figures in dark clothing were clustered around a portable drilling rig, pulling core samples. They scattered the second I shouted, throwing equipment into a pickup, their taillights disappearing into the dark. They had taken samples from my land, without permission, deeper than their own supposed covenant allowed. The next morning, I found a note taped to my front door, typed in generic Arial font, $250,000. Take it and disappear, or lose everything. $250,000 for land sitting on $400 million in oil. The offer wasn't meant to be accepted. It was meant to insult, to demonstrate how thoroughly they intended to rob me. The public assault began that afternoon. The HOA had launched a PR campaign. A website called Protect Red Bluff featured my ranch prominently with aerial photos and inflammatory language about reckless carpetbaggers threatening community water supplies. I was painted as a developer masquerading as a rancher, willing to poison the land for profit. The comment sections were full of vitriol. Vivian Thorne held a town hall meeting without inviting me, speaking to 200 angry residents about Mr. Sterling's exploitation. They had successfully isolated me. But isolation brings a certain kind of clarity. I closed my laptop, walked to my filing cabinet, and pulled out the old survey map, the deeds, the legal notices. They had attacked too quickly and too broadly. That level of desperation meant they were afraid of something. They were afraid I'd find the truth. I hired a private investigator, a weathered old field guy named Garth, who drove a dusty Ford pickup. Garth listened to the entire, unbelievable story without interrupting. "They moved too fast," he finally stated, "economically. They gave themselves 2 weeks to build this structure. That means there's sloppiness." 5 days later, Garth's report came in. The HOA was a total sham. P.O. Box forwarded to Delaware, no physical operations. The ghost members didn't exist in any DMV or credit report. But the gold mine was Vivian Thorne. Garth had documented 4 separate meetings between her and the CEO of Apex Energy Group, a mid-sized, aggressively expanding oil and gas firm. Apex was already known for disputed mineral rights lawsuits, and the connection was undeniable. Vivian wasn't a community president. She was a corporate front. And then Garth found the smoking gun. On paper, Apex already owned the mineral rights. 18 years ago, the previous owner had filed paperwork separating the mineral rights from the surface rights and sold them to a shell company for $500,000. That shell company was eventually acquired by Apex in 2018. But my deed says I own the mineral rights, I insisted, stomach dropping. Garth nodded grimly. That's because the 2001 separation was fraudulent. The original owner didn't have the legal authority to split the rights. They were already consolidated in a family trust. Apex knew the paperwork was forged when they bought it. They were waiting for someone to buy the surface land so they could execute this play. Marlo looked up from her laptop, energized by the criminal implications. This is RICO territory, Jake. Racketeering, fraud, conspiracy. We're not fighting an HOA anymore. We're fighting a corporate conspiracy. The next week, the second lawsuit hit, centered entirely on environmental hazards. They claimed my property posed an imminent risk to the Red Bluff Aquifer, citing a 30-page environmental impact report from a firm I'd never heard of. It was expertly formatted, scientifically dense, and completely fabricated. Marlo proved every soil sample referenced in the document came from coordinates that didn't match my property. But it didn't matter. Judge Harrison Worth, the judge assigned to the case, issued a temporary restraining order that afternoon, barring me from accessing the northwest 50 acres, exactly where the oil deposit sat deepest. The order required me to prove the land was safe before restrictions could be lifted. The estimated cost for their remediation? $2 million. I went to my bank for a loan. They denied me, politely. Mr. Sterling, your title shows multiple claims and pending litigation. We can't issue loans against clouded titles. The trap was closing. I sat in the dark house that night, holding Alara's simple gold wedding band, calculating if pawning the last physical piece of her would buy Marlo enough time to fight back. The cruelty of it burned. Then came the final betrayal. Marlo called, her voice strained. We have a problem. Someone's been leaking our legal strategy. My assistant, he's been working part-time for the firm representing Vivian Thorne. They knew every argument we were planning to make before we filed it. They've been one step ahead the entire time. I stood on the porch, looking out at the dark prairie. They'd backed me into a corner financially, legally, emotionally. But Alara's voice, the one that always cut through the noise, echoed in my memory. When they come at you this hard, it means you're standing on something they need. I went inside and opened my laptop. I knew what I had to do. They wanted me broken? They'd have to work harder. The email arrived at 3 a.m. A string of random characters, routed through an encrypted service. 2 sentences. I have the evidence. Midnight diner on Route 79. Tomorrow night, 11 p.m. Come alone. I was there 15 minutes early. At exactly 11 p.m., a nervous-looking man in his early 40s entered, scanning the booths. He slid in across from me, ordering coffee but not touching it. My name doesn't matter, he whispered, his hands calloused. I spent 6 years working for Apex as a field geologist. They fired me when I refused to falsify an environmental report on another project. He pulled a small USB drive from his pocket, setting it on the table. Everything you need is on here. Internal memos, emails between Vivian and Apex execs, the genuine geological surveys showing they've known about your oil since 2019, and the financial records proving they paid off Judge Worth's campaign. He pulled out a folder. That's the real geological report on your property, not 3.5 million barrels. For 0.1 million, plus natural gas. Your land is worth closer to $400 million. They're not just stealing from you. They're planning to become billionaires off it. The USB contained email chains discussing the fabrication of the 1995 covenant, wire transfer records showing $50,000 moving from an Apex subsidiary to Judge Worth's campaign fund, and internal strategy documents outlining the entire plot, labeled Operation Sovereign Grasp. Why help me? I asked, gripping the drive. Because I'm tired of watching corporate criminals crush small landowners, he said, standing up. I signed an NDA when they fired me. If I go to the authorities, they'll bury me in lawsuits before anyone listens. But if you discover this evidence through your legal defense, it's admissible. You have standing. I'm just a ghost passing information. Then he was gone, disappearing into the neon night. Marlowe and I spent the next 2 days building the case. We leaked select portions of the USB to a trusted journalist. The resulting article detonated across regional news. Oil giant allegedly used fake HOA to steal Texas ranch. Judge implicated in bribery scandal. The narrative flipped overnight. The courtroom was packed when the preliminary hearing reconvened. Judge Worth was presiding, but his judicial confidence was gone, replaced by the tight expression of a man watching his career circle the drain. FBI agents were sitting quietly in the back row. Vivian Thorne's lawyer opened with a performance, presenting their fabricated covenant, their expert witnesses, all impeccably credentialed PhDs, painting me as a criminal negligence case. Then Marlowe began the counterattack. She called the geologist to the stand, identifying him simply as a former Apex employee with relevant expertise. He walked the court through the USB contents, his technical explanations slicing through the expert testimony. Then Marlowe introduced the emails, projecting them onto a screen for the entire courtroom to see. Vivian Thorne to Apex CEO, ensure covenant appears legitimate, backdating essential. Apex VP to Arthur Vance, Worth secured through standard contribution channels. Target acquisition timeline for sale within 6 months of property purchase. The court was stunned into silence. The final hammer fell when Marlowe filed a motion to disqualify Judge Worth himself. She presented the bank records tracing the $50,000 campaign donation from Apex subsidiaries directly to his re-election fund. The courtroom erupted. Worth slammed his gavel repeatedly, but his face had gone pale. The FBI agents stood up and moved toward the exit, already on their phones. Your Honor, Marlowe's voice cut through the chaos. Given the documented conflict of interest and credible allegations of bribery, we request immediate recusal and transfer to a judge without financial ties to the parties involved. Worth finally spoke, his voice strained. This court will recess. I am ordering a case transfer to Judge Alana Ashton's docket, effective immediately. The trial reconvened 3 days later. Judge Ashton was known for her intolerance of legal games. After 4 hours of deliberation, she delivered her ruling in clear, unambiguous language. The covenant was fraudulent and dismissed. The HOA was declared a sham organization with no legal authority over my property. The restraining order was dissolved immediately. And finally, she referred all evidence of fraud, bribery, and racketeering to state and federal authorities for criminal prosecution. The courtroom exploded. I saw Marlowe grip my shoulder, her professional composure finally breaking. Across the room, Vivian Thorne's icy mask shattered. As she tried to leave, FBI agents approached her, their badges visible. She was being detained. The corporate machine that had tried to bury me was being dismantled in real time. The criminal indictments came down 4 months later. Vivian Thorne faced 15 charges, including racketeering and bribery. The CEO of Apex, 23 federal counts under the RICO statute. Judge Worth, 12 years for corruption. The civil judgment awarded me $4.2 million from Apex, plus punitive damages. I paid Marlowe and Garth their substantial, well-earned fees. I used the money to start that foundation in Alara's name, dedicated to conservation and legal aid for small landowners. I kept the ranch, and after 3 months of intense negotiation, I partnered with an ethical energy company, securing 70% of the royalties, unprecedented in the industry. I stood on the ridge overlooking my land a year later, watching the sunset. The ranch house was restored, the fences strong. In the distance, the drilling operations continued under strict ecological protocol. Wealth generated, not through destruction, but through fairness. The battle had given me resources, but more importantly, it had given me a purpose I thought I'd lost forever. I drove to the cemetery that evening, yellow roses in hand. I sat beside Alara's grave. I did it, sweetheart, I whispered, touching the stone. Kept the land, fought them off, made something good from this mess. You taught me how to fight. You see, Most people fold when the system feels rigged against them. They take the settlement and disappear. But what happens when the only thing you have left to lose is your silence? Was it right for me to use the one piece of evidence that could expose a sitting judge? Did I owe the community that tried to brand me a villain an explanation, or just the satisfaction of seeing justice served? When does fighting for your own property become fighting for everyone else's rights? Let me know in the comments below. Have you ever faced an HOA that felt like a criminal organization? And what would you have done with that USB drive? Hit that like button and subscribe, because trust me, this is only the beginning of the story of Serpent Creek.